Bonito, operated by Wood Silver Fleet. There are toilets located downstairs, situated at the back of the boat near where you entered. For the comfort of all our guests, we ask that you refrain from smoking on this cruise. If you have a mobile phone, please switch it to silent now. Before we depart, please listen carefully to the following short safety announcement. This boat is licensed to carry 249 passengers. We maintain constant contact with Thames Navigation Service and the River Police at all times. This boat is fully equipped with a full complement of life jackets and life rafts. The life jackets are stowed underneath the fixed seating in the lower level and in the locker on the upper deck, clearly marked with green signs. All exits are clearly marked. From the lower saloon, there are doors at both sides of the vessel, or you can exit through the sliding windows. The upper deck is easily accessible by steps either side of the lobby. In the unlikely event of an emergency, the captain will give you full instructions. For your own safety, and in particular for any young children on board, please remain seated as much as possible.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Silver Bonito and your London Eye River Cruise. My name is Erica. I'm going to be your host as we travel up and down the River Thames this morning. With me downstairs you'll find my colleague Barry. He's here to help you with whatever you should need throughout the cruise. Do go down and ask him any questions as we go along. We do have audio guides available for you guys, available in 8 other languages. We have French, Italian, Spanish, German, Russian, Dutch, Mandarin, and Japanese. So if you would like an audio guide in any of those 8 languages, do head downstairs, talk to Barry. He's seated at the back of the lower deck. Also, downstairs at the back of the lower deck, we have a shop available for you guys. She's down there selling hot beverages. For those of you braving the cold up here, she also does have cold beverages, and she does have alcoholic beverages and snacks. So do go ahead if you get a bit peckish or a bit thirsty, go ahead and go down to our shop also. For those of you seated here on the upper deck, it is very important that you remain seated as much as possible throughout our cruise. This is for your safety, but it's also for our captain and engineer. They're seated behind us, and if you stand up, the potential could be that you are blocking their view, and that would be bad. So of course, if you want to go downstairs to the warmer seating or to go to the shop, go to the toilet, get yourself an audio guide, do feel free, but do refrain from standing up and loitering on the upper deck. And without further ado, I think we're going to get the show on the road. So on our right hand side we have a very famous clock tower, commonly known as Big Ben. But that tower is not called Big Ben. It's actually never been called Big Ben. That tower was renamed the Elizabeth Tower in 2012 for Queen Elizabeth's Diamond Jubilee. Prior to that, it was known simply as the Clock Tower. Big Ben is actually the name of the bell inside of that tower. That bell, by the way, has been chiming on the hour every hour for 156 years. Now, if you were ever to be in this part of the city and hear bells not at that time coming from that particular tower, that's because there are 4 smaller bells that join Big Ben. They're called the Westminster Chimes, and they chime every quarter of an hour. Now, the Elizabeth Tower is attached to a building commonly known as the Houses of Parliament, but like the tower being called Big Ben, this too is incorrect. So that building that is actually called the New Palace of Westminster, and it was completed in 1860. Now, it is the second palace to have stood on this site, and it replaced the original, which burnt down in 1834. Now, the story of that goes like this. There were some members of Parliament who wanted to get rid of some ballot sticks, because back then ballots were kept on sticks instead of papers, but they were far too posh to do it themselves. They hired some laborers to do it for them. So the laborers showed up, tossed the sticks into the furnace, and promptly went to the pub to have a drink. The fire then quickly raged out of control, destroying almost the entire building. Now, the original palace had at one point been a royal residence, but the last monarch to live there was King Henry VIII, before he moved down to Whitehall Palace. After that, it did become home to Parliament, and there are two houses of Parliament, a House of Commons and a House of Lords. In the House of Commons, they sit on green benches. In the House of Lords, they sit on red benches. Also green and red, these two tents outside of the new palace. Green for the House of Commons, red for the House of Lords. These are their eating areas. They are not permitted to eat together, as they were worried that this would lead to corruption, and as we all know, it's the government. We certainly can't have any corruption there. Speaking of not having any corruption, inside those tents you get the cheapest pint you're going to get here in London. 89p for a pint in those tents, because they're not paying taxes in there. Give them a wave. Not sure if there's anyone that can't quite tell. Sir, if I could ask you to take a seat, please. Alright, now part of the original palace does remain. I need you to take a seat, please. Now again, part of the original palace does remain. If you look to your right-hand side, there are a set of steps leading down to the water. Now we only see about 8 of those steps right now, but those are black rod steps or traitor steps, and they serve one very, very particular purpose. If you were to be found guilty of treason inside of the Palace of Westminster, you would have been brought down those steps, put into a waterman's boat, and brought down to the Tower of London, where you were to be tortured and or executed. That is the very same route we'll be following today, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll be looking for volunteers for the torture and execution portion of our tour. If you would like to volunteer to be tortured and executed, all you need to do is stand on the upper deck of this vessel. A joke which has gone over the heads of some. Oh well. Now, the 3 identical buildings on our right-hand side are the Florence Nightingale wards at the St. Thomas Hospital. 3 of the original 7 wards that used to stand there. There used to be 1 ward for every day of the week, so that's why there were 7. And it went like this: if you came in on a Monday, you went into Monday ward, Tuesday into the Tuesday ward, Wednesday into the Wednesday ward, etc., etc. Now, we lost 3 of those original 7 during the Blitz, and a further 1 to a fire after the war. But that's okay, because the 3 we're left with are Friday, Saturday, and Sunday wards, so at least we have the weekend. Now, this bridge that we've already passed under once is Westminster Bridge. Painted green for the House of Commons. Now, you may have noticed Lambeth Bridge now behind us was painted red for the House of Lords. They used to have to walk to work on their assigned bridges. That rule is sort of out of use now. I should let you know, though, on this river cruise, it is perfectly acceptable to wave at strangers on bridges. This is the only time in London where you can wave at strangers. If you were to wave at strangers on the tube, they're going to look at you like you're a bit mad. So I wouldn't recommend it. Alright, I do see lots of cameras coming out to take pictures of our world famous Coca-Cola London Eye, but I'm going to save that for the finale of our tour. And I'm actually going to direct you to look to your left-hand side, directly across from the London Eye, to this white building with the green roofs. Now, that building is the Ministry of Defense, and they have a very interesting history with us at the London Eye, because you see, they didn't want the London Eye being built. They were worried that spies would book a rotation and get into our capsules, and then, using high-powered telescopes, cameras, and binoculars, steal government secrets that were for some reason left lying in front of the windows. So they were actually so concerned that they took the London Eye to court, trying to prevent the construction from continuing. But I do like to imagine the judge's face, because he basically told them, you're the Ministry of Defense. Maybe defend your own windows and buy yourself some curtains. And that is what they've done. Those windows have actually now been blacked out for security purposes. that were implemented because of us over at the London Eye. The building on the left now, I mentioned earlier Henry VIII, who moved to Whitehall Palace. The Whitehall Palace used to stand on our left-hand side there where that lovely building is. This building, though, is called Whitehall Court. Built in the same place as Whitehall Palace once stood. Of course, that palace is now mostly gone. So this building was built as home to the Liberal Party in the country, but then that party got very small. And so now, it is home to the Royal Horse Guards Hotel and Mansions. Two parts of the original palace, well, not quite the original, but two parts of Whitehall Palace do remain, though. We still have Henry VIII's wine cellar, and we have the banqueting hall of Charles I. Now, as we come underneath these bridges, do please look to your right-hand side, and you will see the Royal Festival Hall, built in 1951 as part of the Festival of Britain, which celebrated the end of World War II. It's now part of the South Bank Centre, where it's joined by the Queen Elizabeth Hall, the Purcell Room, and the Hayward Gallery. But above the Queen Elizabeth Hall, we have something quite curious. We have a boat. And no, that's not there because London hasn't seen the sun in over a month. That's actually an art installation and a hotel room known as a Room for London. Now, if you'd like to stay there, you need to enter your name into an online ballot system, and if your name is pulled, if you are the lucky winner, the grand prize is the ability to pay £400 for a single night up there. Not the most expensive room in the city, though. Do look to your left to the white building with the green tile roof. We've just come a bit past it, but that's the Savoy Hotel. Now, the most expensive suite at the Savoy Hotel goes for £10,000 per night, with a 3-night minimum stay. Now, the Savoy was the first hotel to have entirely en-suite bathrooms, and also the first hotel to have electricity throughout, and a cocktail bar. Coming under Waterloo Bridge, now otherwise known as the Ladies' Bridge, because it was built primarily by women during World War II. They built it out of Portland stone instead of heavy granite because Portland stone not only is a lighter material, but it is also self-cleaning, so it's up there getting it clean this morning. On the right-hand side, we have the Royal National Theatre, definitely my favorite theatrical venue in the entire city. It is meant to be the best of what British theatre has to offer, and I think it does an absolutely amazing job. Some of the best shows to transfer to the West End and New York's Broadway started in there. Shows like Curious Incident of Dog in the Nighttime, One Man, Two Governors, and my particular favorite, War Horse. These shows have been the recipients of both Olivier and Tony Awards, for those of you familiar with the theatre scene. Another connection of this theatre to Laurence Olivier is that he was the first artistic director of the National Theatre, and their largest space, the Olivier Theatre, is named for him. There are 3 stages in there, as a matter of fact. Ahead of us on the right-hand side, we have a red brick building, and above the building, a tower that says OXO. Now, that is where the world-famous OXO stock cubes used to be made. But let's tell you something, you cannot advertise on the banks of the Thames because the Thames is a royal highway. So how did the OXO Corporation get their name on their building? Well, they were taken to court for the breach of advertising law, but they had quite a good lawyer who basically said, oh no, that's not our name. We're not breaking any rules. We just ordered 3 windows in random geometric shapes. And just so happened to get a circle, a cross, and a circle, and any resemblance to our company name, we assure you, is purely coincidental. And they got away with it. Ahead of us on the left-hand side now we have a magnificent view of the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral. This, by the way, at least the 3rd version of St. Paul's to stand there on Ludgate Hill. This one was completed in 1710 after the previous medieval cathedral burnt down in the Great Fire of 1666. Now, the medieval cathedral was actually twice the height of this one. An absolute triumph of Gothic architecture. But this one was designed by Sir Christopher Wren, who was a very prolific architect after that Great Fire of London in 1666. But he wasn't actually an architect, he was trained as a mathematician. And so he liked to put significant numbers into the construction of his buildings. This one, for example, 365 feet to the top of the cross on the top of the dome. That is 1 foot for every day of the year because faith is for every day of the year, not just Christmas and Easter. So we're now approaching Blackfriars Bridges. There are actually 3 bridges here at Blackfriars. This first one, Blackfriars Road Bridge, a very beautiful bridge, probably one of my favorites. Do take a close look at the columns on either side as we come underneath. At the top of those columns, we have carved birds. This side we have freshwater birds. They point towards the Cotswolds where the Thames begins. And on the opposite side you will see saltwater birds pointing towards the ocean, because under this bridge is where the Victorians believed saltwater met freshwater in the Thames, and there was just no one around to tell them that no, it doesn't really work like that. Now also you may notice these columns are shaped quite a bit like pulpits, and that's sort of in tribute to how Blackfriars got its name, because Blackfriars was named for a Dominican priory which stood on the north side of the river where they wore black. Now this second bridge, even more interesting because it is above these red columns. Above these red columns we have an invisible bridge, and this invisible bridge has a very important job because it carries the Hogwarts Express all the way from platform 9 3/4 at King's Cross to Hogwarts in the north. I'll tell you about that third bridge on the return trip. We will have increasingly beautiful views of St. Paul's on our left-hand side. One of the best ones anyways. Will be right before we pass under the next bridge, which is Millennium Bridge. Now, even though it has the name of the Millennium Bridge, it was actually only open for a day and a half of the new millennium, because when it opened, they discovered that it wobbled. In fact, it wobbled so much people were getting sick, and people were fainting, and they were having to go to hospital. So they had to close the bridge for 18 months, which was longer than the original construction time, and it cost more to repair than it cost to build, probably because they had to consult NASA. Now, when the architect, Lord Norman Foster, was asked why he built a wobbly bridge, he said that it wasn't his fault, but the people in London walk like they're in the army, and that is why the bridge wobbled. Now, as we come under the bridge, you'll be able to look up, and you'll see some squares, and on the squares there are 4 springs on each. Those are the shock absorbers that were added by NASA. On the right-hand side we have a white building with a thatched roof, Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. It is a recreation of the Globe, completed in 1997. Built with tools, materials, and methods of the Elizabethan age. No power tools were used in the creation of that building. And they just added a couple modern conveniences. First of all, they added lights to simulate daylight for evening performances. They added a sprinkler system onto that thatched roof because thatched roofs were made illegal in London after the Great Fire of 1666. They added toilets with running water, and most importantly, they did add women on the stage. Back in Shakespeare's day, women couldn't be actresses, but now they can, and they do perform at Shakespeare's Globe. Now, the Globe itself is closed for the season, but the Globe has a second theater, actually. It's the Wanamaker Playhouse just along the side of the Globe there. It's a Jacobean theater as opposed to an Elizabethan theater, entirely lit by candles. Now, folks, it is beginning to rain on the upper deck. Just a reminder to remain seated unless you are headed downstairs to where it's not raining. Now, the original Globe Theatre stood on our right-hand side where you see the black building with the letters FT. That's where the Globe originally stood. And 2 doors down from that, you'll see a brick pub with some red windows. It's the Anchor Pub. Now, there has been a pub there since the 1300s, but this one has been there since 1615. It's where Shakespeare's actors would have changed their costumes, and it is certainly where they had a drink after each performance. This next bridge is Cannon Street Railway Bridge, and I have been told that if I can't say anything nice, then I shouldn't say anything at all. And so, a moment of silence for Cannon Street Railway Bridge. Alright, it is getting a little bit too weathery for me up here. I'm gonna go downstairs to where it's warm. So if you look up on the right-hand side, you'll see the tallest building in Western Europe. That is the Shard, designed to look like shards of glass. And it is 300 meters of fanciness. Fancy shops, fancy hotels, fancy restaurants, fancy viewing galleries that are twice as tall as London Eye, but only half as good. Fancy apartments that are still empty because they want 44 million pounds for them. Basically, it's filled with lots of empty space because no one can afford to be there. Side note, if you can afford to be there, I am single. Now we have a very exciting bridge we're about to come under, ladies and gentlemen. The bridge we are passing underneath right now. Look to your left-hand side and read the writing on the wall because we are now underneath London Bridge. That's right, this bridge right here, the one we are under, is London Bridge. I know, it is just so exciting. Now this version of London Bridge was built in 1971 after they realized that the previous Victorian Bridge was sinking into the mud. It just had not been designed to handle the weight of that many cars. The Victorian Bridge was sold off to an American developer by the name of McCulloch for the cost of £2.5 million. He took it down and brick by brick shipped it to Lake Havasu in Arizona where he built it, and it is now the second most popular tourist attraction in all of Arizona. Which says something about that part of the United States. Anyway, there has been a bridge there for about 2,000 years. The first one was built by the Romans when they settled Londinium. Now the magnificent battleship ahead of us is called the HMS Belfast. It was the largest light cruiser of the British fleet in World War II. Those guns you see on the front there, capable of firing up to 12 miles. They fired the first shots on the D-Day landing and they are still fully operational. This ship was due to be melted down for scrap after its service in World War II and the Korean War, but instead it was bought by the Imperial War Museum and it is now a permanent fixture here on the Thames. It is a museum itself, absolutely fantastic to go and visit. Now the HMS Belfast is called the Belfast because it was built in Belfast in Northern Ireland. In fact, this ship was built in the same shipyards as the ill-fated Titanic, but this ship has had a bit of a better story in that it hasn't found itself on the bottom of the ocean. And ahead of us now we have what may be the most photographed bridge in the entire world. Tower Bridge. Built in 1894, it is a Victorian vascular bridge, meaning the center section opens to allow tall ships to pass through. But I'm sure you all knew that bit. What you probably didn't know is that this bridge is actually built entirely out of steel and iron. Any stonework you see is merely to complement the design of the Tower of London, which you can see on your left. Now, the Tower of London is nearly 1,000 years old. William the Conqueror began building the central tower called the White Tower in 1066. It was later finished by his son, William Rufus. Now folks, I know it is tempting to stand as we approach Tower Bridge, and I'll probably let it go if you only stand for about 2 seconds. But then you must sit back down. But absolutely no standing in the center aisle. Very good. Alright, now as we pass under Tower Bridge, it is very important that you wave at the people up there. And you want to get them to wave back, because if you wave at them and they wave back at you, you do get 5 years of good luck. So wave, maybe make a little bit of noise. You might have to make a little bit of noise because no one is looking. Hello up there, excellent! Thank you very much. That's Doris. We paid her to stand up there and wave at all of you. See you next time, Doris. Now, I've not just made up that tradition, folks. It actually comes from the days of grand sailing voyages, when this would have been the last bridge that a sailor passed on his way out of London. Now, they believed that if they waved to their loved ones waved back, they would have good luck and return within 5 years. And there's no standing in the center aisle, so I do need you to take your seat. Thank you. Beautiful view of Tower Bridge behind us now, but we will be turning around, so you'll see it again, not to worry, ladies and gentlemen. So we are now in the old Port of London, which was once the busiest port in the entire world. The buildings around us, on either side, they're called wharves and were kind of riverside storage. Now obviously this is no longer the busiest port in the world, it's probably not the busiest port in the anything. And that's because of containerization. Container ships are much too large for this part of the Thames. And so the port had to be moved further east to allow for those larger ships. Now this is actually a very posh place to live. Butler's Wharf, after the port became very derelict, was bought for about £2 million. Now a one-bedroom apartment without a river view goes for about 1.2 million. So that person got a great return on their investment. Interesting story about Spice Wharf though. For a number of years after the tenants first moved in, every time they ran their water, it smelled like cinnamon because of how long the building had been used to store spices. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now beginning our turn. You'll want to look to your left to get a great view of Tower Bridge, but do please, I will insist that you remain in your seats as we make this turn because sometimes we get quite rocky at this bit and I don't want anyone to fall or even worse, fall overboard. We've had 0 incidents, we would like to keep it that way. But again, do look to your left, you'll get a magnificent view of Tower Bridge and the ever-changing skyline of London. Now the towers on Tower Bridge did serve a purpose. If you were a pedestrian at the time the bridge was new and you were walking across the bridge but those bascules began to open, instead of waiting for the bridge to close, sir, please take a seat. Instead of waiting for the bridge to close, you could walk up one of those towers, across the walkway, and down the other side. Problem with this walk was that it meant 4 flights of stairs in either direction and took something like 20 minutes, whereas just waiting for the bridge to open and close almost always took less than 10. So it was quicker to just wait. Now folks, I would remind you that if you do stand up and take more than 3 seconds, you're probably blocking someone's view behind you. And they did pay the same price for a ticket, so just a thought. That walkway, because it wasn't getting used, was sort of a home to less than savory characters, thieves, muggers, ladies of a somewhat horizontal persuasion. The walkway was closed for everyone's safety in about 1910. But then it was reopened many, many years later as the Tower Bridge experience, where you go up, you learn about the bridge, you learn about the Port of London, and they've even installed some glass walkways. So as we pass under the bridge, you can look up, and you'll see some glass walkways up there. You'll probably see some feet moving around. Give them a wave. Sometimes they notice and wave back. I am going to start talking about the Tower of London, though. So it's been many things throughout its life. It started its life with the Royal Palace. It's been a royal zoo, a royal mint, the home of the crown jewels, and of course a place of torture and execution. Now, attesting to that grisly history, you'll see on the right-hand side some writing that says "Entry to the Traitor's Gate," known as the first one-way road in London because if you went in that way, you weren't coming out again. Only person they brought in that way and then to later be released was Queen Elizabeth I. She was imprisoned by her sister, the Queen Mary Tudor, only to be released to become queen herself. It is now again raining and cold. I'm going back downstairs.
Okay, so we do like this.
On the right-hand side, we do have a collection of London's strange skyscrapers. The one that's shaped like a bullet, well, we call that one the Gherkin. The one that is narrower at the top and is at the bottom, we call that one the cheese grater. The one that's wider at the top and it's the bottom, well, we call that one the walkie-talkie. Now they all have official names, but their official names are boring, so we don't call them that. Interesting story about the walkie-talkie though. When it was built, it had a bit of a problem. The sun's rays were actually reflecting off those windows at the top and magnifying down to street level temperatures well over 100 degrees Celsius. Hot enough to melt a luxury car. Not very good. Now further down on the right hand side you'll see a golden orb above the roof line. That is the top of Christopher Wren's monument. Commemorates the rebuilding of London after that Great Fire of 1666. The monument is 62 meters high because it stands 62 meters away from where the fire began on Pudding Lane. So the fire began in a bake shop. It began in an oven, and then it raged for 3 days, destroying 80% of the city and leaving 100,000 people homeless. Now ahead of us we have London Bridge again, and I haven't told you about my favorite version of the bridge, which would be the medieval version. Now it's stood here for over 600 years, crossed the Thames in 19 arches, and had an entire shanty town on the top. That was up to 6 floors of shops and homes crossing that bridge. And you can actually see a model of that bridge inside the church, St. Magnus the Martyr. That church will be able to see on your right-hand side between the last 2 buildings before London Bridge. And then next to St. Magnus the Martyr, you will get a full-length view of the monument, which to this day is the world's largest freestanding column. Which is quite impressive when you consider where it was built. On our left-hand side, moored permanently between 2 buildings, we have a pirate ship. Francis Drake's Golden Hind. Well, it's a replica of Francis Drake's Golden Hind. We call this one the Golden Hind II. Now in 1577, Francis Drake set sail and he became the first Englishman to circumnavigate the entire world. Doing so, he stole £25 million worth of treasure from the Spanish and Portuguese. Now when he returned to England, he probably should have been hanged as a pirate, but instead he was given a knighthood because that £25 million used to pay off the entirety of the English national debt. The next bridge ahead of us is the very lovely Southwark Bridge. But it has another name. It's also called the Lonely Bridge because it has the lowest footfall of any bridge in London. Now it is actually fairly busy today, but it's been busy the last couple of days. I'm not sure if there's road work somewhere that's diverting over this bridge, but usually this bridge is very, very quiet. But it also has the distinction of being the only gas lamp lit bridge remaining here in London. So due to its quiet nature and the lovely gas lamps, it makes an excellent place to have a romantic evening stroll. On the left-hand side, we have a 325-foot chimney of the old Bankside Power Station. Designed in the 1950s by Giles Gilbert Scott. It was closed not that long after in the 80s because it was putting too much pollution into our air, only to be reopened in the year 2000 as the Tate Modern Art Gallery, which is the most visited modern art gallery in the world, which might be because it's free, but might also be because it is just that good. In front of the Tate, we currently have a Christmas market. You'll notice them all over London this time of year. It's a good place to get food, it's a good place to get drinks, it's a great place to get drinks actually. And it's a great place to do a little bit of Christmas shopping, maybe find some unique gifts, even some unique souvenirs. So I would recommend checking them out. There's this one here, there's another one further down on South Bank, which I'll point out, and the largest is Winter Wonderland, which is in Hyde Park. Now that one also has a lot of rides, but if you're staying out more towards East London, there is, I believe it's called Winterville in Victoria Park. So the bridge ahead of us is Blackfriars Railway Station. I actually quite like this station. I think it has great views of the river. It also has a very long platform. It's quite fun to watch people run for their trains at this station, actually. Because the platform is so long, they often find their waiting at the wrong end. So that's one of the things I do to entertain myself at work. Now I do have to talk about these red columns again, because I have received an owl from the Ministry of Magic. They told me that I can't go telling you all their secrets, so I have to tell you something else. Those columns used to be St. Paul's Railway Bridge, which brought the first steam trains into London. They didn't think it would be strong enough for later diesel trains, so they began building the new bridge which is above us now, as they were tearing the old one down. When they got down to the columns, they realized they were so well stuck into the floor of the Thames, and the only way to remove them would be to use dynamite, which would have damaged the new bridge, it would have damaged the road bridge, and it probably would have damaged a bit of London on either side. So they decided, let's just paint the columns red, maybe no one will notice. On the right-hand side, we have a white building with a steeply sloped, dark green roof. Now, that is the Old City of London School for Boys, and it has on it 4 statues, representing 4 of England's greatest scholars. So from left to right, we have Francis Bacon, William Shakespeare, John Milton, and the one on the far right is new. Holding his football, we have Wayne Rooney. Just kidding, it's not Wayne Rooney. But I'm shocked, there you go. It's actually Isaac Newton, he's holding his globe. On the right-hand side now, we have the magnificent World War I